Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna, this is Coffee, Books, and Bullet Journals, and I'm going to talk to you about the books that I read in the month of May. Alright, so this is a May wrap-up. It's going up a week later than I normally would do these, but if you notice, I did not post anything on my channel or on my Instagram all last week in response to everything that is going on in the country and really the world. I decided to step back. My voice is not what needed to be heard. It needs to be heard. I'm a white woman. I'm not the one that needs to be speaking right now. So I took a week off. I promoted Black creators and Black Booktubers. I have been really trying to read books from Black authors, not because it's the thing to do right now, not because it's popular or trendy to be following these people or reading their works, whatever. I know that I need to be an ally, and this is how I can do that. So I would like to straight up apologize for the fact that most of my books have not been from authors of color the past few months. Looking at my list, I don't have many of them. Of the ones, like, there's only a couple that I read in May that were authors of color, and that's not good enough. I need to use my voice to talk about people who are being oppressed, not getting the attention and the voice that they deserve. So, that being said, I'm also going to leave some links down below of places you can donate, petitions you can sign, just some really good resources and information. We all need to educate ourselves. We all need to be a better ally, and I'm going to use my platform to do that. So, that being said, May ended up becoming a really good reading month as far as the quantity of books that I read. I definitely think that I came out of my slump. I think I may have fallen back into it, but that's neither here nor there. But as far as May, I read a lot of books. I read 14 books in the month of May. That's almost a book every other day. So that's really cool. I read 4,917 pages, which is more pages, more books than I have read any month this year. I am really happy with that. Quality-wise, we did not read some great books this month. I had one 4.5 star and one 5 star, and those were both rereads. My average rating was a 3.39 average, so I had one 1.5 star, one 2 star, 4 3 star, 3 3.5 star, 3 4 star, and then the 1 4.5 and the 1 5 star. Had some disappointments, definitely, that's for sure. As far as genres, I read 2 contemporaries, 4 dystopian, 2 fantasy, 2 graphic novel, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 2 sci-fi books. Age demographics, I read 4 adult books, 1 middle grade, 1 new adult, and 8 young adult books. This was definitely the month where I read more YA. I think that in the past I had been reading more adult books, and this month, for a couple of reasons, ended up getting being a lot more YA heavy. I did listen to 7 books on audio, I read 2 ebooks, and 5 physical books, which is a good month for me, honestly, because there for a while I was only reading like 2 physical books, maybe 3, and everything was on audio, so it's pretty good. The first book that I'm going to talk about is my 1.5 star read, definitely a disappointment, and that was the graphic novel Camp Spirit, and that was by Alexa Lenore. I requested this on NetGalley because it was about a summer camp, and I was a camp counselor in college. I've talked about that before. I really thought it would be really fun. I thought it would be nostalgic because this was a college kid going back as a camp counselor, which is my story. I believe my review for Goodreads or on Goodreads opens with, "This book is as boring as quarantine." I read this, like, I think I finished it on the 1st. It was very, very quick. But it was just so boring. Like, I think it was only 200 pages or something like that. But it took me 4 days to finish. Because I started it in April. It was so boring. And apparently it was supposed to be scary, and not at all. But it had a lot to do with, like, camp urban legends, and it had this, like, paranormal twist. And I just literally couldn't be bothered to pick it up. Like, at all. It was so boring. And like I said, it was supposed to be like a horror camp, like, you know, campfire ghost story type thing. But the stakes were just so low that, like, I don't know. I didn't care about the characters. Couldn't tell you the character's name at all. Yeah, it was really boring. And I'm no longer going to talk about this book. My second disappointment and my 2-star read was The Circus Rose by Betsy Cornwell. If you watched my most anticipated reads of the quarter, you know that this was one of them. And again, it was just so boring. It started off really strong. I think I read a third of it in, like, one sitting. It was so fast. Like, the writing was really lyrical. And then we just got, like, really, really freaking lost. Like, we didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I don't think the characters knew what was going on. I'm pretty sure the author didn't even know what was going on. It was weird. It was supposed to be very queer, but I feel like it was queer just to check off boxes and, like, to be, I'm different than other queer books. Like, is that even a trope? I don't know. But there was one character that was non-binary, and they had very androgynous terms. It wasn't like gender neutral terms that are commonly used. I even Googled it, and I was like, it didn't come up as, oh, these are terms that are non-binary or gender fluid. So I just kind of had to assume. I believe the terms were, like, femme, which, like, I've never heard before. Not saying it's not out there, but from the research that I did, I couldn't figure. I just had to kind of assume that that's what we were talking about. This book is a queer retelling of Snow White and the Red Rose. I'm not really familiar with that fairy tale or that story, so I can't really talk about the equation of it or, like, the similarities, the differences. I don't really know that story. I was really confused because it, like, is sold as a queer retelling of Snow White. And that's what I thought going into it. And then I wasn't seeing it. I didn't know what was going on. It was just kind of a hot mess. There was a character in there I did really like, and that was the pet bear. But it was a very protective mama bear, and I loved them. That was it. But that was pretty much the only good part about that book. Moving on to the first of my 3-star reads. The first one is going to be Wish by Barbara O'Connor. This is a middle grade book. I read this as part of the mini contemporary-a-thon that happened over Memorial Day weekend. And this is a middle grade book about a girl whose mother can't take care of her. And so she ends up going to stay with her, like, estranged aunt or something, like somehow related. And they're in North Carolina, somewhere down south. I think it's North Carolina. And this book just did not work really well for me. The character read really, really young. She was supposed to be like a 10 or 11-year-old, but then when she would, like, get into an argument with a little boy, and she was treated, she was a spoiled brat. I'm just gonna be perfectly honest. She, like, got into this argument with a little boy about the wishbone, and she didn't get the wishbone, and she, like, threw a fit about it. And they were just like, it's okay, just let her have the wishbone. And I was like, she's an almost 11-year-old child. Like, that's not okay. So, yeah. The other thing is, I think this is really stereotypical for Southern culture. Like, everything is fixed with grits and bacon. Which, I mean, yes, but no. I don't know. I don't live in North Carolina. I've not spent much time there, so it could be representative, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It was just weird. As far as it being a family story and an adoption story, All the Impossible Things did it a whole lot better. This was just kind of very run-of-the-mill, very stereotypical. It was just okay. Like, it is a really, really fast read. I think the audiobook for it was like 4 hours. So that was, I finished it like in one afternoon while I was working. I'm so glad that I did Goodreads reviews for most of these books, because I don't remember most of them. But my next 3-star read is The Dinner List by Rebecca Searle. Searle, I don't know how to say her last name. I read In 5 Years last month, and so I thought I would go ahead and pick this one up, and it was just kind of run-of-the-mill. The concept of it is super intriguing. It's 5 people that you would want to see come to dinner with you, living or dead, and so it was, there were like people from her personal life. Audrey Hepburn was in there because she was such an inspiration to the main character. It's a really, really cool concept. Problem is I didn't care. The main character was just so forgettable, and she acted like a teenager for the large majority of the book, even though she was post-college age. It just, like, here's the thing. Rebecca Searle used to write YA and then kind of moved into the adult genre, and then she kind of took the writing style from the YA genre into adults. And while there is some overlap, especially when you're writing contemporary or, magical realism, I guess, there's a little bit of overlap, but you have to realize that the characters are going to grow and they're going to sound different at 30 than they are at 16. And I don't think we've quite bridged that gap yet. Because looking back on it, I feel like In 5 Years kind of did the same thing, if I remember right. I feel like I probably talked about that at some point. There was also a really codependent relationship in this. Her boyfriend would, they would have a miscommunication, or they would, something would happen, or he was just, lazy and wouldn't go get a job. And she would go confront him, and she would, she would be like, okay, when I get home from work, I'm going to, I'm going to kick him out. We're going to end this. And then he would come home, or she would come home, and he would have cooked this massive dinner and brought her flowers and cleaned the house and, all this stuff. And then she, would back off of her anger or her irritation of him. And it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I felt like Sabrina was kind of a doormat in a lot of instances. So, again, a very short book. I'm pretty sure I finished this one in one day. But it was just not, I don't know. In 5 Years was definitely better than this one. But it was boring. I'm just going to be honest. Moving on to my next 3-star read, and that is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This was the group book for the Literary Alliance for the month of May, and Kylie, Crystal, and I all read it together. Kylie actually has a really cool community-based review about this up on her channel that I will link down below, and it takes different excerpts from other people talking about this book, what the author says about certain things in this book. It was really, really well done. You should check it out. This book is about a woman who is on trial because it is assumed, or she's charged with blowing up an H-bomb? Is that how you say it? The oxygen chamber. This premise basically starts on that people can use this oxygen chamber, and they basically get pure oxygen saturation, and it can cure things like infertility, and I think there was a patient with cerebral palsy. There was a lot of talk about autistic children and autistic people, and whether or not that could cure them. It brought up a lot of discussion about a cure for autistic children, the need for a cure for autistic children. There's a lot of conversation that I didn't necessarily agree with, but conversation nonetheless. I do not, like, I'm not autistic. I don't have any family members that are autistic, so I'm looking at it clearly from an academic or research standpoint. I don't have any personal stakes in this matter. What I found really, really, I don't want to say irritating, but like it just rubbed me the wrong way, was there were these protesters at the beginning and they were protesting this oxygen chamber and that it shouldn't exist. And because they thought, you know, autistic children are healthy and whole and there's no reason to fix them. And so for a lot of the book, they were painted in this very negative light that the protesters must have been the one that started the fire and that blew up the oxygen tank and killed these people. And then it was the mother of the autistic child because the mother had said these terrible things that, you know, she didn't want her autistic son anymore. And it just rubbed me the wrong way about, like, but again, I'm not autistic. I don't know, like, I don't have a personal stake in that, so I don't know how I should be feeling about it. Another thing that I didn't really love about this book was that the characteristics of the children were completely based off of their symptoms. So it was the kid with cerebral palsy, the autistic kid that bangs his head on the wall if he's not watching Barney. They didn't have any other defining characteristics. Now, I know that Angie Kim is a debut author, and so that could be something that's just like the fault of a debut novel, and that hopefully her writing gets better as she goes along. I know she's writing a new novel that's supposed to come out next year, maybe? I don't know. Everything's pushed back with COVID. We don't know things. So, like I said, this definitely sparked some conversation and some discussion, but it wasn't as amazing as I thought it was going to be. So many people love this book. This is getting hyped to the rooftops. And unfortunately, I guess I have the unpopular opinion, but a lot of the things just rubbed me the wrong way. And then when we got to the end of the book, I was just like, but we didn't resolve those things. We didn't challenge those conversations or those beliefs that the characters were having. So what does the author think about this? And I couldn't rate it any higher. Moving on to my final 3-star book. And this one, I think, was probably the biggest disappointment, but also the one I was probably expecting, especially once I started seeing reviews. I will have a spoilery vlog. It's either already up or it's coming up. I've changed up a lot of this week's schedule, so if it's already up, I'll link it up there. If not, stay tuned. But that is The Ballot of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. The first, like, probably half of this book, maybe even 2/3 of this book, were amazing. It was, the beginning was fascinating. I think the world building was amazing. I came off of a binge read of reading The Hunger Games, which you'll see here in a minute. And so being back in the world, but seeing the origins of a lot of the things that are tradition by the time the Hunger Games, the 74th Hunger Games comes along, was fascinating. Because the 10th Hunger Games are very, very, very different than the 74th Games. It was not something that was celebrated and you know, you were not a celebrity or anything like that. So it was fascinating to see how these things kind of started and came about. That part was really, really cool. Then we got to the middle part, and I was so confused by it, and I feel like this book definitely could have been like 100 to 150 pages shorter than it was. I mean, it is chunky. It meandered quite a bit, let's be honest. And then we get to the end, and we have the same energy, the same excitement, the same like high stakes mentality that you had in Mockingjay. And I loved that. Other than like the plot just meandering a little bit, it wasn't a bad book. I'd highly recommend it, especially if you are a fan of Hunger Games, because it's just interesting to read about, this fictional world and the kind of the history of it. However, I don't know that I liked that part of it more than I liked Snow and his story. There's a huge gap between the end of this book and the beginning of this one. There just is. And I was kind of hoping that there would be more of a villain origin story in this, and kind of showing where he went from this book to the dictator that he is in the Hunger Games. And we just didn't get that. He's the protagonist in this book, and he's not a terrible person. I mean, he says some terrible things. And you're like, oh, well, you are underlying just a horrible human being. But I think that there's a lot of, like, nurturing of that horrible human being attitude in between. Because obviously it's 64 years, 63 years. So there's a lot. I don't know, it wasn't everything I wanted. I'm just going to put it that way. I wanted a better bridge. Still a good book, still really interesting, but not 100% there yet. Moving on to the first of my 3.5-star reads. The first one I'm going to talk about is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Let's start with this. I love Victoria Schwab's writing. The way that she can create a world or worlds and make them seem so real is fascinating. That was probably my favorite part about this. The different Londons, how they interconnected, how they were different. That part was fascinating. My problem with her, I don't even know if it's her writing or that it's just a rut that she's in. She writes the same characters in pretty much every V.E. Schwab book. Kel is very similar to the characters in Vicious. And I think I read Vicious before this series, so I loved Vicious, but now that I'm reading her backlist, I'm realizing that it's just a regurgitated story with like a different plot. If that makes sense. Like, we have regurgitated characters. I also listened to this on audiobook, which probably was not the best idea. I mean, the audiobook is fine, but I did find myself getting really lost at times, and I would kind of zone out. There were some characters that didn't get as much screen time as I would have liked, and so then we get to the end, and I'm like, wait, who's that guy? How do we know him? So, part of it is definitely my fault, but I probably would have done the same thing if I was reading it physically, not gonna lie. I'm probably going to make some enemies. I don't love Lila. She's just kind of whiny, and she just moved the plot along. She's just, like, she did a thing because the plot needed her to do the thing, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, not my favorite. And I don't really have, now I'm, like, not super inclined to pick up the rest of the series. I have them all. But it's just not, like, one that I'm really wanting to write this second. My next 3.5-star read was a completely random story, or random book that I picked up. So I picked up The 100 by Cass Morgan. I had like this impromptu idea to read all of them in like a week, and that didn't happen. I read the first one in 2 days, but I didn't pick up the next one because Hunger Games came out. I did annotate it, not for like characters and stuff like that. What I wanted to do was see the difference between the book and the movie, because the TV show. The show is very, very different than the book. And like everything that you see here that was purple, I think. Yeah, the purple ones, like the purple tabs, are all places that do not exist in the show. There's an entire character in here that has nothing, like is not a character at all in the show. So this book is, for those of you that don't know, is a dystopian novel about a world that basically has had to live in space on like a space station for the last, I think it was like 97 years. In the show it's 97 years. It might be longer in the book, I don't remember. Several generations. So yeah, it had to have been more than that. Anyways, they send 100 people down to Earth to see if it is basically livable. And all of these people are basically convicts. They're teenage delinquents. And it's a scientific experiment, but they're sending down like their people that they don't care as much about, basically, to see if the Earth is livable again after this nuclear war, something that happened that's kind of vague in this book. It's a very, very quick read. Like I said, I read this book in I think 2 days. It's actually good. It's very different than the show, in the fact that like the show and the book are like cousins, not even sisters. But I think, like, if you take the two apart and you critique them for their own thing, they're actually pretty good in their own... Like, this story is good separate from the show is good, because there's, like I said, there's even characters that don't exist in the book that are main characters in the story or in the show. There's a character in the show that gets killed off super fast and is a main character in the book. So it's different. Still really enjoyed it. It was a fun, quick read. I will continue to read the rest of the, I think it's a quartet. I'll continue to read it. I had a vlog going. I don't remember if I deleted the footage thinking, yeah, that's not going to happen. Or if I'll continue it, we'll see. The last 3.5 star read was a really, really close to being a 4 star, and that was The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg. I had heard really, really mixed reviews about this. Bethany from A Beautifully Bookish Bethany really liked it, and then Becca from Back in the Books, I think it ended up on one of her most disappointing books of last year. This is a story about an AI, or they're called hybrids, so they're like part human, part cyborg, I guess, that basically serves as the face, but in reality the servant to this basically Disneyland on steroids kind of a thing. Like, if you think about a zoo and Disneyland together, that's what this was. This had a lot of commentary about social justice, whether, you know, obviously we're in a futuristic society, and so most of, like, all of the animals are hybrids, so they're part cyborg too. So they talk a lot about cyborg rights or hybrid rights, and whether or not they are human enough to complete acts of violence, or, you know, whatever the case may be. This hybrid is accused of murder, and so there's this whole, like, courtroom aspect to it, which was kind of fascinating. It is a split timeline, so you're going back and forth from the courtroom to things that happened like a year prior that they're talking about in the courtroom. And generally, I don't like books that do that. I don't love split timelines, but this one did it really, really well. Plot twist at the end was pretty interesting, and I didn't actually see it coming, so that's cool. Again, I don't really try to guess, but then, like, when things happen, I'm like, huh, okay, I get that. That makes sense. This one was a really enjoyable read. The audiobook is actually really good for that one as well. And moving on to my 4 stars, the first one is Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This was a reread for me. I read this last year in August, I believe, and it was part of the Literary Alliance. We read this as a group read. So I reread it in anticipation for Aurora Burning that I'm currently reading, because this one kind of ends on a big cliffhanger, and the second book really revolves around that cliffhanger. So I wanted to kind of refresh my memory on it, refresh myself on what happened. So this is the first in, I think, a trilogy, and this book is about Aurora, who was in cryostasis for 200 years and then wakes up, is being rescued by Tyler, the captain of this squad at the academy, and she realizes it's like 200 years in the future. None of her family, her home, it's all been wiped out. Everything is very different than when she went to sleep. And this is a, like, ragtag group of people that, like, the squad that nobody wanted, they all end up together. Because Tyler, who is the captain, even though he has really good grades, he went off on this mission by himself to find Aurora because he heard a distress signal, and then is late to his graduation and got kind of the last pick of everybody when choosing his squad. This is definitely a found family trope, which I love, and it does it really well. There's Amy and Jay have a very unique way of writing, in the fact that, like, each person is kind of the voice for different characters, and so if Jay's writing Tyler, for instance, then Amy doesn't write Tyler's perspectives, just so that they have, like, a clear and concise voice the entire time. While the authors will not say who writes what, it's really fun to, like, try to pick them out. It's similar to Illuminae File in the fact that it is, you know, this deep space type esque adventure story, but it's not mixed media. But really, really interesting. Highly recommend that you pick it up. The next 4-star book that I'm going to be talking about is Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. This is another one that's like Booktube's darling. It's like hyped by everybody. And I loved it. I mean, the art style, while very minimal, is so precious and adorable. But I think that I'll like Volume 2 a lot better because this has so much tension in it and so much, like, will they, won't they, are they friends, do they like each other, that kind of thing. And it's, once we got to the end of it, there wasn't enough payoff for me. So I think that I'll like Volume 2 a lot better just because you'll see that relationship. I love these two boys. They are adorable. And I just wanted to see more of them. It is very innocent and naive, but it's nothing new or thought-provoking or unique in its presentation. It's about a boy who is openly gay, another boy who thinks he's straight, but then has a crush on a boy. One boy is being bullied by another boy in their school. It's very typical, like, coming out type story drama. So nothing revolutionary, but a very cute story nonetheless. All right, moving on to my last 4-star read, and that was Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Rai. Really, really enjoyed this. This is the story of Katrina, who is Rhiannon's best friend from The Right Swipe. I think that I liked The Right Swipe better only because I think that I connected with her as a character more. I didn't necessarily understand Katrina as much, but this was really, really cute. This is about a woman who goes to a coffee shop. She does have a lot of anxiety and doesn't like going out in public, doesn't want to be seen, and she goes to this coffee shop that she thinks that she's safe at, and somebody sits down next to her because the cafe's really full, and they start having a conversation, and she thinks it's just this like normal, whatever, casual conversation. But someone in the table next to them or down, a little ways, starts live tweeting their meet cute, and it goes viral. And she gets really, really scared and terrified because obviously, like, it wasn't a meet cute. It wasn't something that she wanted. And the guy in this situation kind of profits off of it. He starts getting a lot of followers on Twitter and Instagram, and he's like, oh yeah, we're in love, blah 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 blah, and like really tries to profit off of it. And she gets so terrified, and she ends up going away to her bodyguard's family farm with her bodyguard, and that's where the romance starts. So it is a bodyguard romance, which is probably one of my favorite romance tropes of all time, let's be honest. And this was really, really sweet, really cute. I originally, when I was reading it, I didn't love Katrina's character because I thought that she kind of was a doormat. She didn't kind of stand up, and like, she was not a very strong woman. But as you read more into it, you get to know her more. You realize why she is the way that she is, and it makes so much more sense. And then there's a huge payoff at the end, and you do generally love her. I'm going to talk about my 4.5 and my 5-star reads together because I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You guys are probably have left the video by now. Anyways, so my 4.5-star read was Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, and my 5-star was Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. So this is the second and third books in the original Hunger Games trilogy. Like I said, I read all of these in anticipation for the new prequel, which I highly recommend. Like, if you haven't read the original trilogy in a while, do it before you read Ballot of Songbirds and Snakes, because so much of the little nuanced details will really stand out to you, and it'll be like, oh, cool, I remember that from Hunger Games, and now they're talking about how it kind of originated, but if it had been enough time, you may not have caught on to that detail. The one thing I really like about Catching Fire is that it has the same, well, not the same story, but we are seeing another Hunger Games, and it could have been really easy for Suzanne Collins to just regurgitate information, but in this one you really get into the head of Katniss, and it's a much more mental game than the first one is. We talk about alliances and people that should and shouldn't work with, and it's just a lot more mental. It's a lot more like high stakes, as it were. I mean, Hunger Games is high stakes, but this one just seemed like it was so much more. And a lot of people, and I don't know why, but a lot of people did not like Mockingjay. Like, it's their least favorite book in the trilogy. People say like they get bored through it, and I think this one's my favorite. Well, yeah, it is. It's the only one I gave 5 stars to. It's fantastic. It is high stakes the entire time. We have this tension between Katniss and Peeta. As a whole, as a book, I feel like that was super high stakes. The ending was just fantastic. Anyways, those are the 14 books that I read. I hope that I didn't bore you to tears while talking about these books. Thank you for sticking around. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. And all of the other links to my social media will be in the description below if you would like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
One night to find the answer to me. What makes this heart beat faster?